everyone. So today we're going to do a garden Q&A. It's been quite a few months since I've done one, and just for anyone that's either just joined over the summer or has had any other questions, I want to do a whole video dedicated to any questions that you might have. So I asked on the community page and I got a lot of great responses, so that's what we're going to do today. Now, it is absolutely beautiful outside temperature-wise, but it's a little windy, as you can tell. So I might have to pop inside if the wind doesn't stay a little bit calmer, but we'll see how it goes. So let's start off with the first question. Where did your gardening bug come from? So I've always loved nature. I've always loved flowers. I've always loved everything gardening related. Specifically though, my grandpa had in my memory, it was a fairly large garden in Maryville, Indiana. I don't know how large it actually would be if I went back as an adult, but I have very vivid memories of going up and down the aisles with him, and he would harvest some rhubarb. I would eat the stalks. My grandma would then take it in and make some pie. I just have those memories of being really happy in his garden, so I always knew that I wanted a garden of my own. However, as I moved out as an adult and into different apartments and moving to Chicago, I never had what I thought you needed to have a garden, which was a yard. In fact, for many apartments, I didn't have any outdoor space whatsoever. And then in 2019, I got tired of waiting, and we did have a deck at the place we were renting. So I just started gardening. I think most people know that once you start, it kind of becomes an addiction and you just keep adding more and more plants every year, and I really love it. But gardening's always something I really loved, and having those memories as a child and knowing I wanted to recreate that for myself one day, that is what led me back to gardening. Next question was, what was my favorite new addition to the garden this year? And it's actually right behind me. It is my bucket planter. So I got this in February, I think, just off of Amazon. It's meant to hold bouquets, but I drilled holes in the bottom of the buckets and turned it into this vertical planter, and I really, really love how it turned out. In fact, it almost just looks like a wall of flowers. So I'm always on the lookout for things that I can turn into planters that maybe aren't, and this has worked out so well for me in the garden this year. Well, I made it through 2 questions before realizing that the wind was too strong and needing to hop inside. So I will go through the rest of these here in my office. So the next question is, how much time do you spend in your gardens each day? So I'm very lucky. I have worked from home from 2015, so years before I started gardening, but working from home means that I can pop in and out of my gardens as much as I want. In fact, this is my office. All my work is done on a laptop, and our garden, the front garden, is attached to doors right there. The back garden is right through there. So I can hop in and out, although during the summer, like we are now, I'm really not out there during the middle of the day because it is very hot, but I try to start my mornings out there as many days as I can, weather permitting, because I notice a huge difference in me as a person when I can start my day outside in the garden versus like being stuck inside on a rainy day or throughout the entirety of winter. So I would say in the morning, I usually go out, I water, I do some garden tasks that I really shouldn't be doing and give myself time to do that later, but I'll see something I need to do, I go and do it. And then I will have my morning coffee out there. So I would say the first 30 minutes to an hour every day I'm outside, and I usually wake up, I like to wake up with the sun, but I would say I'm out there probably between 6 to 6:30 every morning till about 7:30, and then I come inside. And then, like I said, sometimes I'll pop in and out. If it's really hot during the day, I will water, but I'm not usually doing much in the garden while it's still super hot, because however warm it is outside, it feels much more intense on a rooftop decks. So I probably don't go out again until 6 to 7 at night. And then the majority of the garden tasks I will save for then. So I would say probably about 2 hours every day, maybe a little bit more if I'm doing something more intense in the garden. But because my garden size is so small, I don't usually have projects that take hours. I don't have to spend hours weeding. If I'm planting something, it's a couple plants in a container. So a couple hours a day, and I try to at least make sure some of that is just sitting and enjoying the garden versus always feeling like I have to do something. So yeah, I'd probably say about 2 hours per day, weather permitting. Next question, as your raspberries sucker, will you keep adding new raspberry containers? It's so hard to eat grocery store raspberries when the fresh picking ends. Don't be mad at me, but I think I'm getting rid of at least one if not both of my raspberry bushes for next year, because in my small garden, they are too large. They're always getting in the way. And because they are not thornless, they are full of thorns, and I often get stabbed or almost poke myself in the eye. This year I put them on wheels, so let me go back. I have 2 raspberry bushes currently. I have one that I bought originally from Stark Bros that I think it's now in its 4th year. It was an older plant when I got it, but I think it's been 4 years in my garden. The second one is actually a propagation from a runner from the first one. So the second one was a free raspberry bush. But I just don't know if I love them enough. Again, when your garden is small, you really, in my experience, have to love something a lot to make it worth it. And raspberries really are one of my favorite fruits, and they do taste a lot better from the bush than from in store. So it's hard, but I think I am gonna get rid of those too. However, I am gonna look for a smaller, more compact, hopefully thornless variety, and I think that will work much better in the space that I have. But if you do have raspberries in containers, you can very, very easily propagate them. In fact, I think I had the video showing it, so I will link that down below. Next question is, do you have any trouble with soil in your grow bags becoming hydrophobic? So far, I haven't. So hydrophobic just means that the soil basically repels water. I haven't had any issues with that anywhere in my garden, in any type of container. I have had it inside with my house plants. So you'll be able to tell if you water and instead of it absorbing into the soil, it either just sits on top, or what happens a lot in my house plants is that the soil will become so hydrophobic, it's kind of like shrinking away from the sides of the pot, and then the water runs over the edges instead of getting absorbed into the soil. I think why I don't deal with that as much in the garden, at least so far, is that I am constantly adding organic matter to it. So I add either compost to the existing raised beds and larger grow bags that I don't completely swap the potting soil out of, or I do in the smaller containers completely swap out for new potting soil every season. So I think that's why I don't deal with it. For my houseplants, if that happens, what I do is I will use either a chopstick or the handle of a paintbrush. I poke holes in the soil, I'll water it that way. You can also take your whole pot, if it's small enough, and just put it into like a bathtub of water or a bucket of water, and it'll help absorb the moisture that way. And then I'll also try to add some organic matter, usually a compost that I just get a bag of from the store, to my houseplants. So I've never dealt with it in the garden, but I wouldn't say like regularly, but I've had at least, I'd say 3 or 4 houseplants that I've had that happen to, but it's been pretty easy for me to remedy. Next question. As your channel evolves, do you see the possibility of getting a bigger space to grow your garden? What is the ultimate goal for this channel? So first, the ultimate goal. My ultimate goal when I started this was just to get more people growing, especially in spaces where they didn't have a yard like I did. When I was first starting to garden on my deck, I learned a lot from other gardeners. I watched a lot of YouTube, I watched a lot of Garden Answer, I watched a lot of Impatient Gardener, Epic Gardening, and although there were some videos specific to growing things in a pot, I couldn't find one resource that was just all around container gardening, and there are some differences when you're gardening all in containers than when you are gardening maybe in a traditional yard but have some pots. So that's why I started sharing what I was doing, just to show people that it was possible. So my favorite messages that I get are, I started gardening because of you. You've inspired me to start gardening on my balcony. So that has always been my ultimate goal, and I feel like my channel has been achieving that, so that is fantastic. What I didn't expect were the opportunities that I've had so far, and I've had some really cool opportunities. So I got invited to events with proven winners. They send me plants every season, which is great. I got invited to events at Ball Horticultural. Just came back from an event at Bailey Nurseries. I've been on Epic Gardening's channel, which was a question in here too that I'll get to next. So there's been so many surprises that have come, and I'm almost kind of glad that's how it worked out, that like my ultimate goal hasn't been to get invited to events and like get notoriety in the gardening community. It's really just been to show people how to garden in containers. And then everything else is just kind of like a nice little bonus to having this channel. So that's been really great. I've also just got to meet a lot of really cool people. Like I've made actual friends from the gardening events. So that's been really, really fun. So I I don't think beyond that I really have an ultimate goal. I guess now it would be to just be able to keep doing this. I mean, this isn't my full-time job. I have a video on that about how I don't know if I'd want this to be a full-time job because it's not a stable income every month that is up and down throughout the year. And YouTube in general, well, social media, I feel like in general can be very finicky and you never know long-term what's gonna happen. I guess that can be the same for any job, but I feel like there is more stability in like a traditional job. So I don't know. I would like to just be able to continue to do this as long as I can. And then the other part of the question was, do you see the possibility of getting a bigger space to grow your garden? In terms of leaving our home, not right now or not for the foreseeable future, but stay tuned for a video coming up soon where I might have some more space to garden. Next question is, how did the collaboration with Epic Gardening come about? So there's been so many things that have happened since starting my YouTube channel and Instagram mostly that have just been mind-blowing. And I keep thinking I'm gonna wake up and realize that this has all been a dream. But I got a message on Instagram from somebody who works on the Epic Gardening team. This is around the time when they were looking to add more people to the team and introduce some new faces. And they just reached out and asked me if I wanted to first participate in like what to grow for. Was it already back in April? I think. So I think it started with April, and then they do a task list every month as well. And then since then, they've just been reaching out and saying, hey, do you want to do the one for this month? Do you want to do the one for this month? And I have very excitedly said yes, because I still can't believe I get to be in Epic Gardening videos. And then maybe a couple months ago, they also messaged about doing a whole video just on my garden. So if you haven't seen that Epic Gardening video, they let me have a whole one to myself to talk about container gardening. So I will link that down below. But it's just been incredible. Now, if this is something that you want to go for and get opportunities like this, what I've found, at least from my experience so far, is that I've gotten more opportunities through Instagram than any other platform. Like I have a YouTube, obviously that's you right there. I have a TikTok, which I kind of understand how to use TikTok, but also kind of don't understand it. And I feel like there's a lot of benefits and disadvantages to like YouTube versus Instagram. But in terms of being able to like reach out and connect with other people or other brands, that's a lot easier to do on Instagram. So having your presence there, I think allows more people to contact you, but also I think having a presence on YouTube is also helpful for people to see that and get to know you. So that's just been my experience. Like when Proven Winners reached out, when Bailey Nurseries reached out, that was all done through Instagram. Next question. Preparing amending garden beds for perennials and or cut flowers. What do you do before you wrap up your garden and bring things in for the fall? I'm a beginner gardener and I don't feel like there's enough content in this area on YouTube. All of the material on setting up garden beds is for vegetables. So first thing, because I did get a few questions and it's probably the comment I'm getting asked the most on my videos right now is, how do you overwinter XYZ plant? So I'm gonna do very detailed videos on each specific type of plant. So I'll show you how I overwinter my hydrangeas. I will show you how I plant bulbs and overwinter them. I will show you how I overwinter my rose bushes. Like every individual plant, I will have a separate video for. I'll also show you when I pull the annuals in my beds, what I do with that for the next season. I will say though, I don't really do anything different compared to vegetables and cut flowers. In fact, sometimes I'll grow cut flowers in a bed that I grew vegetables in last year and vice versa. So that process is pretty similar. So in terms of like bed prep for vegetables versus cut flowers, that's pretty much the same. But essentially I will remove the plants usually in the fall. Sometimes if I'm feeling a little bit more lazy, I'll wait till spring. But assuming that the plant is healthy, I will just cut it up. I think it's called the chop and drop. Cut it up, drop it in the bed, and let that break down over winter. I will add some leaves from downstairs if I can, and that's about it for winter. And then in the spring, I do what I call my bed refresh, where I add compost and perlite. Compost for the nutritional benefits, organic matter, perlite to increase the drainage, and that's about it. I've found that over the years, I think when I started, I would overcomplicate things so much because you look up information and there's so many recommendations, you feel like you have to do all of them. And I've really kind of pared it down to what's worked the best for me. So again, I will share all of that information and have separate videos for overwintering every single thing that I do. Again, kind of a generalization. Some stuff for the perennials I'll leave exactly where they are. Some I will put in a temporary greenhouse, and some I will move down to my garage. Next question, do you garden anything in the fall or winter? So a little bit in the fall, I'll have like my fall vegetable crops, I'll have pansies out there, but not as much as I'm actively growing in the summer. And in the winter, I don't do anything outside. I mean, I have my houseplants, which you can't see any right now. I will do a houseplant tour in the fall once we move inside, but I do have a bunch of houseplants that I ignore basically from April to November. And then I try to make up for ignoring them over the winter months. So I do a lot of houseplant care and maintenance then, but I really like the break from the garden that winter brings. I mean, like I said, I spend a couple hours in the garden every day, which I love. But then when winter comes, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all this free time to just do whatever I want with. I read a lot more in the winter than I do in the summer. So I like having that break. In fact, I've never appreciated the seasons more than after I started gardening. I still don't like winter very much because I don't like cold weather and it being dark at 4, but I appreciate the quietness of it and the like hibernation factor of winter a lot more now as I'm kind of more in tune, I guess, with the seasons, because gardening really does make you in tune with the weather and how it's changing throughout the year. So it's a very long answer to your question. A little bit in the fall, winter, nothing, but I do take care of my houseplants. Next question, how much of your stuff do you overwinter indoors and do you feel it's worth the effort? So because I like the downtime in winter, I don't really bring a lot of plants inside. Now, two different things. So I do move a lot of plants to the garage, but I'm not doing anything to those plants other than like watering them once a month, maybe. But in terms of bringing stuff inside, I used to bring a lot more plants like inside our home over winter, but I just found that it led to a lot of pest issues and I didn't really enjoy trying to keep on top of all of the issues that I was having that I typically don't have when they're outside in the garden. So like my lemon tree I got rid of because I got really bad scale every time I tried to bring that inside. I will bring in some herbs and just kind of harvest from them a little bit throughout winter. But other than that, no, I'm not bringing anything like inside of our home to take care of. And again, I just like that downtime that winter brings. Next question. Love the show of flowers put on by container plants. Have you considered a pop-up greenhouse, store it in the spring, or putting 4 posts on the corner of raised beds to drape a tarp to protect winter greens? What about a small evergreen tree covered with lights, winter interest, could be decorated with berries, popcorn strands, peanut butter, and seed pine cones for our feather friends? So I actually have a greenhouse. I've tried 2 different greenhouses. 2 or 3 winters ago, I tried one that was 6 feet tall. The problem with gardening on a deck is securing said greenhouse to the deck. I tried it with heavy pots, and the 6-foot one, because the wind up here is so strong, the bars, like it was metal bars and plastic, it bent the bars in half, the wind did, and ripped the part of the greenhouse off. And it was bouncing around the deck, and my husband found it. So I gave up on tall greenhouses, but I did get a shorter one from Jardinier, maybe? I'll link it down below, but it is lower than the wall that surrounds the deck. So I was able to keep that up all winter without it blowing away. Now I didn't do it this past winter because I carried everything down to the garage, but now I have a lot more plants that I want to overwinter. And as some of these perennials get larger, I probably won't be able to carry them downstairs. So I am going to use the greenhouse again, test overwintering some of my plants in there. But yeah, I will bring that out maybe around November, put it away maybe around April. Right now it's in a closet somewhere, hopefully with all the pieces together. So I will be setting that up. What was the other part of this question? Ooh, the evergreens. So the hollies did not survive, but I got more cold hardy evergreens out there now. So what my ideal would be, they're on rolling caddies right now, is to roll them right up to the windows, because the doors out to the garden are glass windows, and put some lights on them. And I do put pine cones out, but that's on the front deck in a different area, and decorate the trees though so I can see them through the window. But I don't know, I'll probably will still do that with these. The trees last year were zone 5, so I protected them a lot more. I think these are zone 3, so they could maybe stand on their own, but I also have to be wary of the root ball of the plants in containers. So I don't know how long I'd be comfortable leaving them just in front of the door. Usually what I do is shove them up like against the corner of the house. Then I'll push the couch, the patio couch that's covered with a tarp, up against it. And then I'll throw a bunch more insulation in between to protect the root ball. So it comes down to the balance of, will my plant survive in a container right in front of the door for me to see, or do I really have to do that extra layer of protection? But we'll see what I do this winter, since it'll be the first one with these hardier evergreens. Next question. Hi from Texas. I hope it's cooling down a little bit for you guys down there. Love your videos. Thank you so much for sharing. I saw a previous video about the types of soil and amendments you use. Would you mind touching on that? And if there's anything since that you've switched up, please. I'm just starting out. Seen a lot of DIY potting soil mixes, but seems like it'd be more work and no guarantees it'd work. Also, where or on what do you repot your transplants? Thinking of buying a small potting station, but some are quite pricey. Last question. Curious to know what cocktails, mocktails, or meals you've made with your herbs and vegetables. All right, so first question, soil and amendments. I think this is another area where I've simplified it. So I am not tied to a particular brand of potting mix or a particular brand of compost. I find through my own experience that if I get potting soil or compost from a local garden center versus a big box retailer, that it's a little better quality. And what I mean by better quality is that I'm not finding pieces of plastic or metal or old plant tags in unopened bags of soil. So that's just been my experience. It doesn't mean I still don't get bags of soil from Home Depot, which is the closest place to us. I definitely do. But just over the years, I've never really found anything odd in a bag of potting soil from a local garden center. So I would say first stop would be local garden center, and then maybe the big box stores. And then, like I said, in the spring, I will add compost every year to my beds that I didn't remove the potting soil from. I will also mix in compost to any of the new pots that I am potting up. I will add perlite for drainage. I'll do some sort of slow release fertilizer. Again, I never found, there's not like one specific brand of anything where I'm like, oh, this is so much better than all of the rest and everyone has to use this brand. It's just the ones I've kind of used over the years and liked, or whatever I can get my hands on. So some sort of slow release fertilizer at the time of planting. A 10-10-10 mix, a balanced mix, is just fine. And then I will add liquid fertilizer throughout the season, especially in my smaller pots. I can really see the nutrient deficiencies there. The brand I like for that is Fox Farm, because that's just the first brand I used and I like it. So that's about it. I used to make sure I had like the specific fertilizer for every type of plant, a berry fertilizer, citrus fertilizer, and eventually I kind of just narrowed it down to sticking to the basics and kind of going more towards all purpose, and I haven't really noticed a difference. So I hope that answers your first question. And again, as I do these stages in my garden, I will make separate videos for those, but that won't be until next spring. Oh, and I did want to say, I do see a lot about DIY potting soils. I can't do that here. There's no place for me to go and get soil. Maybe our parkway, but it's full of roots and I wouldn't trust the quality of the dirt that I am taking out of a parkway in the city next to a bunch of cars. So that's just not an option for me, but I know a lot of people do that. But if it's something that seems like it's gonna be more complicated, as it would be in my case, I don't see any problem just getting bagged potting mix. Okay, next, where or on what do you repot your transplants? Any space available. I don't have a separate potting bench just because of space limitations. If I had a yard or if I had much larger spaces, I would definitely get one just because I think they're cute. But I have found, like you said, them to be pretty expensive. Like I get a lot of my stuff from Wayfair, and even there, I feel like the potting benches are really expensive, but I use my table that I have in the front deck. I use the coffee table that I have in the back deck. I would say I do a lot of repotting inside as well on just the table in the other room. So I don't have a special repotting area. I just use whatever surfaces already exist. And then the last part, what cocktails or mocktails or meals have you made with your herbs and vegetables? So basically anything that we cook for dinner, we add some herbs to because they're right there and it's really fun and they're so much better than anything in store. I'd say I notice it a lot in Well, I mean, I noticed the taste difference in everything. My husband just recently made a quiche and it was really good. The soup, the difference of using fresh herbs in soups is incredible. So that's definitely a favorite. Pasta sauces for sure. As far as drinks, I actually don't make a lot of cocktails on my own at home. I'm mostly just drinking sparkling water and putting some herbs in there. But by far, the most common drink I make with my herbs is tea. I think I have a video on that I'll link down below. We'll be doing that this winter as well. But that is like number one. What I'm using my herbs for is tea throughout the winter. And I love it because then it's the reminder when it is dark at 4 p.m. of my garden. All right, the sun is shifting, so am I. And by the way, if you want little fun rainbows on your walls, I just get little, like, I don't know what they're called, little crystals off of Amazon, cheap, not expensive, and you hang them in your windows and then you have little rainbows. Anyway, next question. This one also has a few different questions, so I'll start with the first one. Best and worst thing about gardening in containers / in the city. This might be more specific to gardening on a rooftop, but for me, it's getting everything up and down is probably the worst part because everything has to get carried up to the balconies, which is on the 3rd floor, and then carried back down. So in the spring, there's a lot of carrying up bags of potting soil. The plants are usually pretty small when I bring them up here, but then of course, like spilling dirt throughout the house is always something I try to avoid. What else? I mean, basically like the raised beds, instead of being able to carry the whole box, I have to open the box downstairs and then maybe make 3 to 4 trips up with all the different pieces. So I feel like that is a little bit difficult. And then in the fall, it's carrying down like the plants to the garage, or whenever we move, figuring out how to get all of this off of the rooftop deck. But again, not planning to move for a very, very long time. So that's probably the worst part, is just transportation up and down. But again, that might be more specific to gardening on a rooftop deck. And then the best thing, I think, is just seeing the looks on people's faces when they realize you can do this in the city, or you can do this all in containers. My back deck garden can actually be seen by other neighbors, and just 2 days ago, someone else was out on their back deck and was like, "We love your garden." And when I bring the flowers out and give them away downstairs, just seeing that it can spread joy to other people. So I think it is just allowing people to realize this is possible, and then whatever sort of joy that I can spread from my garden, I think that is a really, really nice part of it. And maybe something that, like, I think if you lived out, or like when I grew up in Indiana, people have a lot of yards, there's a lot of gardens, so you walk by and you see the beautiful flowers, but it's not so much as a surprise as it might be if you're like just walking through the city and see a bunch of flowers or a really beautiful garden. So I don't know, I think it's the unexpectedness that I like as well. Next part of the question is, what equipment do you use to film and edit your videos? I use an iPhone to film, and I use whatever comes with the Mac to edit, which I believe is iMovie. I am a very basic level tech person, but I know there is a camera that now I feel like everybody I know is using, and let me look it up just in case you are interested. I think I might try to make a switch because it is a smaller camera. It seems like it can be, I mean, not that the iPhone is huge, but it's much smaller. I feel like it probably is a little bit easier to use. And I think there was a feature, another gardener was showing me, where it follows you around. There's a bunch of different tech stuff now, and I feel like I'm so kind of stuck with what I'm used to, but let me see. So it is called the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 camera. And I think someone said they also saw that Kevin from Epic Gardening was using it, so it must be a good camera. Again, I'm still working on my iPhone. I might upgrade to this camera, but I'll probably do that over winter so I can have some downtime and watch a bunch of videos on how to use it. Next part of the question is, what gardeners or gardens inspire you? I feel like so many. I mean, I first started with, I feel like, watching the people that everyone watch on YouTube: Garden Answer, Impatient Gardener, The Rusted Gardener, Epic Gardening, and they kind of gave me the confidence to just be able to do it. And then honestly, if you go to my Instagram and everyone I follow, that's where I get inspiration from. That's why I kind of miss photos on Instagram, because as much fun as Reels can be, I got a lot more inspiration from the photos. So I'll also just go on Pinterest too and type in like container gardening. and get a lot of inspiration that way. But at the same time, I don't want my garden to look like someone else's. So I will grab ideas, but then a lot of it's just putting in more plants that I love. So I feel like gardens of the past of mine inspire my gardens of the future. And then the last question from this one is, do you think you'll ever move to the burbs so you have more traditional in-ground garden space? I feel like, doesn't everyone say they won't move to the burbs and then they end up? But I don't know. So I've been in Chicago since 2012. We purchased our home in 2020. So this is my first time like owning a home, and I really love it. And I love the area that we live in. So right now I can't see me moving. I feel like if we ever did, I'd want like the complete opposite and just be in the middle of nowhere. Where I grew up was more like a suburb, traditional suburb. Now I live in the city. I've never really lived a more rural life, but I also feel like it's one of the parodies of what is the show House Hunters, where it's Bethany wants to be walkable from downtown, but also in the middle of nowhere with 10 acres, but also 2-minute walk from her favorite restaurants. So I love the city life. I love being able to walk wherever I need to go. I don't know if I could give that up, but maybe someday. Oh, and I also just saw that you are in Bucktown. I love the neighborhood. I love your garden walk. Let me know if you're on the garden walk, because maybe I've seen your garden before. And then last question. Thanks for your videos. I was a perennial grower, but I will definitely try annuals this year. I don't have grow lights though, and have never been successful growing seeds. Do you think it is worth investing in some basic ones? I would say yes, just because I've found a huge difference in seed starting from when I would shove them in front of a window versus how they did with the grow lights. They did much better when I had grow lights. I would start with maybe a couple and see how it goes your first season and then add some more. Now, so Gary from The Rusted Gardener goes much more in depth and has much better details about the different types of grow lights. But basically, if you buy something that's labeled as a grow light, it's gonna be more expensive than something that's just an LED shop light, and they're essentially the same thing. So what I started with was just LED shop lights from Walmart, and those worked just fine. So I would just look for LED shop lights. I will link down Gary's video below that goes in again to a bunch more detail, but know that you don't have to spend a lot of money on something that can work for you as a grow light. Now I have since then invested in more expensive grow lights. The only main difference with the ones that I got from Gardener Supply and why I feel like it was worth spending the money is that you don't have to move the seeds closer and further away from the light as they grow. They're high output LED, I believe, but maybe there are shop lights that are also high output. I don't know. But all that said, you don't have to buy really expensive grow lights. Look for LED shop lights. Gary's video I'll put down below with the extra information. And I think that is everything. I can tell that I've rambled far too long, so hopefully when I edit this, I can make it a little bit more succinct. But thank you so much for the questions. If any other questions have come up, let me know in the comments and I will respond to them down there. But thank you so much for being here and allowing me to share my garden with you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.